spent 2 years living in Osage Beach, Missouri, and I can tell you that the Ozarks aren't just a place, they're a presence, a breathing, living entity. The deeper you go, the more you feel it, the weight of the trees pressing in, the quiet that isn't really quiet at all. People talk about the legends, strange creatures out in the woods, and things that don't quite make any sense. Missing people, hillbilly headhunters. You definitely hear enough stories and you start wondering if maybe the woods aren't quite as empty as they seem to be. But the thing is, I was never really one for any of these superstitions. I like and prefer explanations. I like reason and logic. So when I met Levi and he told me he'd lived in Osage Beach his whole life, I figured he was the kind of guy who knew this place better than anybody. He wasn't one to buy into all the ghost stories or the local folklore. Levi was solid, practical. He worked at a restaurant 1.5 miles from our place, and he walked to and from there every day, even in the dead of night. I remember the first time I asked him why he didn't just drive. "Why waste the gas?" he said with a shrug. "It's a straight shot and it's pretty good exercise." And that was Levi in a nutshell, no nonsense. A pretty big guy, strong, the type you wouldn't really want to mess with. He'd been walking those roads since he was a teenager, and he wasn't really afraid of anything out there. Not the wildlife, not the locals, not even the dark itself. To his credit, no one really ever messed with him. And for a while, that's exactly how it was. We ended up moving in together a few months after we started dating. Our place was really nothing fancy, this little rental on the edge of town, where the trees crept right up to the backyard. At night, the only sounds were the occasional truck on the main road or the rustling of branches in the wind. And sometimes, I'd think that I heard something else. A distant howl, a sharp cry, the kind of sound that makes you stop what you're doing and just listen. I mean, we are out in the woods, right? There's always animals making some kind of wild sound. Occasionally, I joke with Levi about it. "You sure there aren't werewolves in these woods?" He'd just smirk at me. "Nah, it's coyotes, maybe even a bobcat." But there was one specific night, where something happened that even Levi couldn't explain. Something that sent him sprinting home like he was running for his own life. Something that, to this very day, neither of us can make any sense of. It was a fairly normal night. Levi had the late shift, closing up the restaurant. I was at home, patiently waiting for him. I wasn't worried. Why would I be? He'd walked that route 100 times before. 1.5 miles of quiet road, with no real traffic, especially at that hour. A straight shot from the restaurant directly to our place. I remember checking my phone and seeing it was a little past midnight and figured he'd be home in at least 15 minutes. I just sat there casually flipping through the channels, half asleep on the couch when I heard footsteps. They were fast and heavy, pounding on the dirt right outside. Somebody was running through our property. Before I could even stand up or react to it, the front door slammed open. Levi barreled through, chest heaving, sweat dripping from his face. He twisted around quickly and slammed the door behind him and locked it. He then shut off the lamp in the living room, casting our entire house in this shadow. I sat up with my heart going haywire. Levi?" He didn't answer me. He was moving from window to window, yanking the curtain shut, glancing outside like he expected to see something staring back at him. He looked scared, but calm, controlled. Everything that he was doing was very calculated. My stomach tightened. "Levi, what the hell is going on?" He turned to me, his face completely unreadable. "Go get the bat." And that's when I knew something was really wrong. The bat, was a crisis mode item. We'd kept it in the hall closet just in case, and we'd never actually even needed it before, but the way Levi said it, the way his voice dropped into something cold and emotional, made my hand shake as I went to get it. Something was going on, and he wouldn't tell me what. I came back to find him by the window near the front porch, standing still and just listening. The room was now eerily quiet, the only sound of the faint whir of the ceiling fan above us. Then out of nowhere, something hit the glass. A dull thump, like a hand smacking against the window pane. I nearly dropped the bat. Levi, on the other hand, didn't move. He just kept watching. Then, after a few seconds of silence, something darted across the porch, the wooden planks creaking under its weight. And then the doorknob rattled. My stomach flipped. Somebody was trying to get inside. Levi didn't even hesitate. He reached for the front door, stepping out into the porch, bat clenched in his hands. "Hey!" he roared. "You want to die tonight? Because I got no problem making that happen." Silence. No movement. I felt frozen in place, my breath caught in my throat. Levi just stood there, chest rising and falling, gripping the bat so hard his knuckles were turning white. The yard stretched out in front of him, the porch light casting these long shadows over our grass. Tall trees stood there like sentries out in the dark. But there was nobody. No footsteps retreating and no sign of anyone running off. Just the trees swaying in the wind. After a long moment, he stepped back inside, shut and locked the door once more. We sat in the living room for the next hour, just waiting and listening, but nothing happened. No more knocking, no more rattling doorknobs. Eventually, the adrenaline wore off and we both exhaled in relief. I was still terrified, but also still confused. I wasn't even sure what I was supposed to be afraid of. Was it a bear? A murderer? Still, I didn't want to press a clearly strained man, so I just waited for him to open up to me. After another 15 minutes or so, he finally opened up and told me what happened. He'd gotten off work at midnight, same as always, tied his apron and counted his tips, and said his goodbyes to his coworkers. He stepped out into the cool night air and started that walk home. The first half of the walk was uneventful, quiet. Even the usual houses that had a light or two on were totally dark, so an unnaturally quiet night, to be honest. The street lamps were buzzing, moths clouding around them, bats picking off the drifters with laser precision. Levi had looked at the bats as he wandered on the street home. Then, about halfway there, right where the road dips into a patch of deep woods, he heard a sound, a dog barking. At first, obviously, he didn't think much of it. Plenty of people around here had dogs. He figured maybe somebody's pet had wandered too far from home. Hell, it could even be a stray that lives in the woods, kicking up a rabbit for dinner. Could be anything, honestly. A dog was the last thing that had him worried. But there was something about it, he said, something that just felt off. He said the bark was too mechanical and short, not the kind of frantic noise a dog makes when it's excited or even scared. Levi's a pretty big dog guy, and he knew in his gut that whatever he was hearing wasn't a canine. He said it sounded human. Levi then slowed down and listened, the hair on the back of his neck standing up like there was electricity in the air. That's when he heard it again, but this time it was closer. That bark echoed throughout the trees, and then Levi swore he heard movement, something shifting in the underbrush, twigs snapping. His gut knotted up and he picked up the pace. But just as he started to walk faster, he said the bark, it changed. It stretched out and warped into something else entirely. Something that started off as a growl but then turned into this garbled, wet snarl. And not just a noise, but words. The guy was screaming in some kind of crazy-ass voice. Then the footsteps started. Not 4, but 2. Again, clearly a person coming up to scare the crap out of Levi. At least that's what he was thinking. It was heavy. He heard crashing through grass behind him. And that's when Levi just turned into a full-out sprint. He didn't think, he didn't turn around, he just ran. Boots slamming against the pavement, lungs burning. And whatever was behind him started to run too. He could hear it gaining ground, bare feet slapping against the asphalt. He said it kept barking, growling, saying all kinds of weird-ass shit. Levi didn't stop until he saw the lights of our porch, until he was sprinting across our yard, throwing himself against the front door. And now, here we are, sitting in silence, trying to make sense of all of it. I don't believe in ghosts," Levi finally said. "And I sure as hell don't believe in any goat man." The goat man is one of our local legends, and the first thing that I suggested. His description was oddly similar to a bunch of stuff that I'd read about online, and that panicky movement, it was really all I could think of. What else would something like that be? But still, Levi wasn't buying what I was selling. I swallowed. "Okay, so what was it then?" He didn't answer me. He turned and just stared at the locked door, as if waiting to hear that sound once more. For obvious reasons, neither of us really slept that night. After Levi told me what happened, we just sat in the living room, that baseball bat resting across his lap. The house was silent except for the occasional groan of the walls settling. I now found myself glancing at the front door, expecting the knob to rattle once more, or for another knock against the window, but nothing ever came. At some point, I realized just how tightly I was gripping the couch cushion. My knuckles were aching from how hard I'd been clenching it in my hands. My heartbeat had slowed, but the tension in my body had not faded. Levi rubbed his face with both hands and then exhaled. "Maybe it could have just been a meth head or something," he muttered, as if saying out loud would make it all true. And I guess it does kind of make sense. Tweakers wandered out of the hills sometimes, paranoid and very unpredictable. They'd steal things from cars and lurk around gas stations, act out in totally bizarre ways. But this, the barking, the chase, the fact that nobody was out there when he opened the door, none of it really sat right with me. "Are you sure it wasn't just a dog?" "I know what I heard." He cut me off. He wasn't even looking at me. His eyes were now on the window, the curtains still swaying slightly from when he'd peeked through it earlier. The weight that was in his voice just sent a chill through me. We waited another hour, but nothing else happened. No sounds, no movement, no creeping shadows out in our yard. And eventually, exhaustion won out. Levi got up and double-checked the locks, then crashed out on the couch with the bat still within reach. I just found myself curling up next to him, far too afraid to close my eyes, but too drained to keep them open. I'd say sometime before dawn, I finally fell asleep. The next day, Levi was different. Not scared different, just really off. I watched him from across the kitchen as he poured himself a cup of coffee. His shoulders were tense and his jaw was tight. Usually, he was the talker in the mornings, cracking jokes and teasing me about how I refused to function before caffeine. But on this morning, he didn't say a word. When I finally spoke, my voice was almost gone. "Are you, gonna walk to work today?" Levi just paused, his fingers fidgeting with the mug. He didn't answer me right away. "You know what, I'm not sure," he finally responded. And that really caught me off guard. Levi always walked. It's his routine, part of really who he was, his fabric. If he was actually considered driving, it meant whatever happened last night had gotten under his skin more than he wanted to admit. And I didn't push it. Sure enough, he ended up taking the car that day, and I don't blame him. To have an experience like that all alone and then have to deal with the fallout yourself, I just wanted to support him in any way I could. Over the next few days, we both tried to pretend everything was normal. Levi didn't even talk about what happened, and I didn't bring it up. But something had now shifted between us, this quiet unease that neither of us wanted to acknowledge. A week passed, then two. Nothing happened. No more knocks at the window, no rattling doorknobs, no barking in the woods. Levi eventually started walking to work again, and I told myself it was over. And then, one night, just before bed, I heard something outside. A low dragging scrape against the siding of the house. I froze with my toothbrush still in my mouth, my reflection in the bathroom mirror staring back at me with wide, unblinking eyes. The sound came once more, a slow and deliberate sound like nails trailing against the wood. I quickly finished up and turned the bathroom light off, stepping off in the hallway, pulse hammering, Levi was in the living room watching TV, completely oblivious. I swallowed hard and forced my voice not to shake. "Hey, did you hear that?" He muted the TV and tilted his head, now listening. Nothing. For a long moment, we both stood there, every nerve in my body stretching very thin, waiting for that noise to come back. It didn't. After a while, Levi let out this slow breath, shaking his head. "Calm down, you're just on edge, that's all." Maybe he was right. Maybe I was on edge. Maybe that's all it ever was. A tweaker, a bad joke, some freak one-time encounter that meant absolutely nothing. But there are nights when I'm lying in bed staring up at the ceiling. I think about the way Levi ran into the house that night, the way his eyes darted to every window, like he was still being hunted. I think about the sound that I heard outside the bathroom window. And then I think about the legends, the ones Levi never even believed in. And I wonder to myself, if I'd been brave enough to pull back the curtain that night, to look outside, what would I have seen? Or worse, what would have seen me? Would it have been the same thing that chased Levi? Or maybe it was just going to be your average critter? I find myself scared of every little noise now after that night. And it's funny how things can change so drastically after one experience. I grew up inside a small town just south of Springfield, Missouri, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and kids would run wild from sunup to sundown without a second thought. It was the late 80s, before the world started feeling as dangerous as it does now, and my childhood was filled with scraped knees, bicycle races, and summer nights spent catching fireflies in glass jars. My family and I really didn't have much, but we did have each other. And the kids in my neighborhood were more like siblings than my friends, super tight-knit and inseparable, always scheming up some kind of new adventure. There weren't that many of us, maybe 5 or 6 regulars, but that just meant that we stuck together. We spent every hour that we could outside, and that meant whatever happened to one of us usually happened to all of us. It's interesting, we operated like a hive mind without even really knowing it. And then there was Greg's dog, Trooper. Trooper was a mutt, some kind of shepherd mixed with enough speed and energy to run circles around all of us. He was the kind of dog that could squeeze through any fence, jump over them if they were too high, and slip out of a collar just like a magician. He got loose constantly, and every single time Greg would gather us all up like little army men and send us off on a search and rescue mission. I'll admit it was fun, and it was something to do in the backwoods of Missouri. On a Saturday in early spring, it was no different. Greg's dad had been working on the truck in the driveway, and somehow Trooper had gotten past him. He shot out like a rocket, tail high, ears flopping, gone before anybody could even yell his name. Which would have been a waste of time anyway. The dog was like a convict, always trying to find a weak spot, always trying to run free. We fanned out across town, calling out for him, checking his usual spots, behind the diner, near the church parking lot, down by the old fishing hole. Pretty much anywhere with a big dumpster was going to be a hot spot. Trooper was a trash mutt. But even with all our searching, we couldn't find him. Nothing. Then somebody, maybe Tyler or Danny, spotted him up near this creek bed. He was standing in the shallows, watching us with his tail wagging, waiting just long enough for us to see him before taking off upstream. And I'll admit, we should have known better. Honestly, we should have turned back. Instead, we tied our shoes tight, following him through the woods, laughing and thinking this was just another one of Trooper's games. This dog was so smart, he would play his own version of tag and hide and seek with us. We had no idea what we were about to walk into. The creek bed wound its way out of town, twisting through the patches of thick forest and limestone bluffs. The kind of place you only go to if you know the land well enough not to get turned around. We followed the water, our sneakers splashing through the shallows, the cold sinking into our socks. The smell of damp earth and moss hung thick in the air, and the further we went, the quieter it seemed to get. No other cars, no other voices, just the sound of running water and our own footsteps crunching throughout the rocks. Trooper was somewhere ahead of us, just out of reach, occasionally catching glimpses of him, a flash of his tail as he rounded another bend, the splash of his paws against the water. Every time we thought we'd got him, he'd bolt again, leading us further into the woods. Greg groaned. "I swear, that dog's half coyote." "Dude, he's totally messing with us," Danny replied. I nodded, but something was off. I was nervous for some reason, and I'd never felt this way before when we chased him. Trooper always ran, sure, but he usually would let us catch up, and this time for some reason he just wasn't stopping. It was like he was trying to lead us somewhere. That's when we saw it, a cave up ahead. Didn't think much of it at first, just this dark opening in the limestone, half hidden by the curtains of vines. A shallow overhang gave way to this deeper passage, its mouth yawning wide open for a person to walk through without even ducking. And Trooper was nowhere in sight. We found ourselves hesitating at the entrance. A damp, sour smell seeped from inside, something rank and old, like wet leaves mixed with spoiled food. "I don't like this," Tyler muttered. Greg just ignored him, cupping his hands around his mouth. "Trooper!" he called out, but got nothing but silence in return. Then we all heard movement, but not from Trooper, from the cave itself, from the inside. A man then stepped forward, emerging from the shadows. He was barefoot, his feet were caked in mud, his jeans were torn and crusted with something dark. His shirt hung off him in filthy tatters. His arms were super thin but roped with sinewy muscle. Behind him, a woman then appeared, just as dirty, her hair hanging in these tangled ropes around her sunken face. We all froze. The man's eyes rolled over all of us, his lips curling into something that was not a smile. "Y'all lost? The hell you doing back here?" Greg just shook his head. "We're looking for my dog." The woman snorted. "Ain't seen no dog. How'd you get this far out?" I swallowed and took a step back. "Guys, I think we should just go." But Greg didn't move. Are you sure? He definitely ran this way." The man then cut him off. "If we'd seen it, we'd shot it." Then he grinned, showing his teeth that were more black than white. "That fur makes a good blanket." A cold dread then slithered up my spine. I wanted no part of this. The woman then laughed and nudged the man. "Might make good eating too. You eat dog before? It ain't bad." Greg's face went pale, and the weight of the situation then settled in on us, and we all realized we were in serious danger. We all began backing away, and then I felt something behind me. Before I could react, arms then wrapped around me, a crushing sweaty grip yanking me backward, squeezing the breath directly from my lungs. I gasped aloud, kicking and struggling, but whoever had me was strong. Whoever this was had scooped us all together. We were crushed, flailing and fighting with everything we had, but it didn't matter. The others were screaming. I twisted, craning my neck to try to catch a glimpse of who was doing this, who'd grabbed us. He was massive, a giant of a man, with a tangled beard and skin darkened by years spent in the sun. His arms literally felt like steel cables as he lifted us off of the ground in this bear hug. My ribs were creaking underneath the pressure. I saw Greg and the others wincing, their faces frozen in panic. I was on the outside, closest to his wrists, so the pressure felt lesser. That first man then chuckled. "Well, looky here." The woman's lips curled. "Pretty little youngins, ain't they?" I thrashed harder, panic surging and making my vision go red. And then just as suddenly as it all happened, he let us go. We hit the ground hard, pain shooting up through my knees. I rolled onto my side to relieve the pressure. The moment our feet touched the dirt, everybody scrambled, fighting to get upright. That giant of a man just stood there watching, his head cocked like a curious dog. He was smiling at us. He had that same disgusting gnarly teeth and same chapped lips. Greg grabbed my arm. "Run!" And that's what we did. We turned around and tore back down the creek, our feet slipping and sliding on rocks, lungs burning throughout the entire time. I didn't dare look back, but I could hear them running after us. The woman shrieked like something unintelligible, something like a threat, I'm not sure. Those men were fast, their footsteps were heavy, splashing through the water as they closed the distance between us. In typical fashion, I tripped, foot catching on the submerged root. I hit the ground and pain shot up through my palms as I scraped them raw. My legs were seriously banged up at this point, and I wasn't even sure I could go any further. Danny grabbed me, yanking me up. Come on, get up!" I could hear them. They were right behind us, and I braced myself for that same crushing squeeze. And then out of nowhere, a snarl. A blur of fur and muscle came barreling down from the ridge above. Trooper. He hit that first man full force, knocking him sideways into the creek with a splash. The guy sputtered and flailed in the water. The woman screamed, "Get that damn dog! We're eating good tonight!" But Trooper wasn't done. He whirled, his teeth flashing in the sunlight, and lunged for the giant. His jaws clamped down on one of the man's arm, a deep, ugly growl leaking from his throat. The man howled, trying to shake him off, but Trooper held true. He bit so hard we could see the muscles in the guy's arm. The woman then turned and bolted, disappearing back into the woods. The other man staggered out of the creek, dripping wet, fully enraged. Then he lunged for Greg, but Greg was already moving, grabbing a heavy rock from the water and hurled it at him. It hit him square in the shoulder, knocking him back with a grunt. This was our chance. We continued running like our lives depended on it, and well, honestly, they may as well have. Trooper kept pace with us. His fur was slicked back, ears pinned flat, glancing over his shoulder to make sure that we were keeping up. We did not stop, not until we saw the first house in town, the glow of porch lights breaking off through the darkness. We continued until we were finally home. We crashed back into town like we'd been shot out of a cannon, panting and bleeding, knees scraped raw from falling on all those rocks. None of us spoke, none of us really could, we just ran, sprinting past all those quiet houses, past the safety of the world that we knew, far too afraid to stop and way too terrified to look behind us. Finally, we were standing on Greg's front porch, gasping out for air, bent over, hands on our knees. Trooper stood behind us, his tongue lolling off, and his body was still tense, as if he was waiting for another fight. His fur was matted with dirt and creek water, and his paws were smeared red where he'd bitten that man. The craziest part was, all the blood was on his snout. Greg's dad yanked open the front door. "The hell's going on?" Greg didn't answer. None of us could. But Trooper let out this low growl, still facing the woods, watching. That was enough for Greg's dad to step outside, and he's not the kind of man who's scared easily, but something about the way he looked, about the way Trooper looked, made him very serious in the moment. One by one, between shaking breaths, we spilled out our story, the cave, the people, the man that grabbed me, and then the chase. Now Trooper fucking saved us. Greg's dad listened, his frown deepening the more and more we went on. By the time we finished, he didn't hesitate. He went straight inside and grabbed a phone. Within minutes, the sheriff was on their way there. We sat on the porch in silence, far too wired to go inside, and still half expecting to see shadows moving between the trees. The sheriff arrived with 2 deputies, and when Greg's dad told them about what had happened, they exchanged a look that made my stomach turn once more. They didn't seem to be too surprised. The sheriff just sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Yeah, I'm gonna be fully honest with you, we've had trouble up that way before." Greg's dad straightened up. "You knew that they were out there?" The sheriff just shrugged. We knew something was. Bootleggers, squatters, old families that don't want no part of society. Hard to pin down exactly who's living out there. All kinds of old cave systems up that way. Real easy to not be found in those parts. And those words sent a shiver through me. They weren't homeless. They weren't lost. They were hiding. Real criminals squatting in our own backyard. Greg's dad was furious. And you ain't done nothing about it? The sheriff just gave him this look. You think we got the resources to comb through every cave and holler out here in the Ozarks? Far as we're concerned, they keep to themselves. Ain't nobody ever reported something like this before. We'll go take a look, but these people are boogeymen. His eyes then flicked to us, to the scratches on my arms, to the torn sleeve of Greg's shirt. I reckon that's changed now, huh? They put together a search party the next morning. They found the cave, but go figure, it was empty. Fire pit was still warm, scraps of food were scattered across the ground. A few makeshift beds were tucked into the back of the cave. The blankets, nothing more than layers of stitched together animal pelts. But the people were long gone. Off to the next cave hideout, I suppose. No footprints leading out, no signs of where they'd gone. It was literally like they disappeared into the trees. The sheriff warned us to stay away from the creek, and we listened. None of us ever went back out there, not once. And Trooper, he never ran off again. It was like he knew, better than any of us, that we dodged a bullet on that day. Branson was a home for a good 40 years. It's not perfect, but is really anywhere. It had work, it had a stable economy, and it had the kind of scenery that made you stop in the middle of the day just to take it all in. Rolling hills, thick forest, the lake stretching out like endless sheets of glass. It was a good place to raise a family, if you had one, and a good place to die if you lived long enough. I myself was born in Tennessee, but spent most of my life here. It was quiet, it was simple. But sometimes things happen that don't make sense. Things I don't have an answer for. And I've spent the better part of 15 years trying to figure out what the hell I saw that night. I never thought of Branson as unsafe, not really. Sure, you get the occasional troublemaker, the drunks, the fights, the out-of-towners looking for a little too much fun, but real danger? The kind of thing that makes your stomach drop, that makes your hair stand up on end before your brain even catches up? That wasn't something I ever expected. There weren't crime waves. There was barely any crime at all, so when something happened, everybody knew about it. There's an old bar called the Wax Room, a little dive tucked into a strip that hadn't changed much since the 80s. Neon lights, cracked bar stools, the smell of beer soaked so deep into the wood, it probably will still be there long after the place was gone. I was a regular there, same stool, same drink, same walk to my truck every Friday night. Routine was good. It was a place I liked, and it seemed to like me back. Then one night, something happened that didn't fit into my nicely neat little puzzle of my life. Something I still can't explain no matter how many times I go over and over it. It was late, maybe 11:30, and I was heading home. The roads were mostly empty, streetlights stretching long shadows across the pavement in front of me. Just me and the radio humming low, that same drive that I'd done 100,000 times before. Then out of nowhere, a kid sprinted right in front of my truck, and I mean appeared out of thin air right before my headlights. I slammed on the brakes so hard I felt the seatbelt cut into my neck. Tires screeched, the smell of burnt rubber filled the air. My heart was hammering in my chest. I was about to lay on the horn, roll down the window and tell him off when I saw something was chasing him. At first, I assumed it was a dog. It was low to the ground, but big, really big. almost too big and too wide. It was fast, moving in and out of the streetlights so quickly that I couldn't quite get a good look at it. Then just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, swallowed up by the dark, and that kid was still running. He then tripped hard and went down, rolled a couple of times, and didn't really move much after that. I honestly thought he might have cracked his head. I then rolled up beside him. My heart was still pounding and leaned over, calling out through my open window, "Hey kid, you okay?" That's when I saw his face. The kid was scrambling, trying to push himself off the pavement, but his legs weren't working right. He had this wild look in his eyes, like a deer caught in high beams, like he'd seen something his brain couldn't even process yet. He looked out of his goddamn mind. I leaned across the cab, cracked the window a little more. "Kid, are you hurt?" He flinched at my voice, his head then whipped toward me, but his eyes weren't really on me. He was looking past me, scanning the shadows behind my truck. Then, all of a sudden, in this gasping, panicked voice, he whispered, "Where'd he go?" I just frowned. "Who?" His hands curled into fists on the pavement. His lungs were hitching. He looked back over his shoulder again and then back to me. The man that was chasing me. Where'd he go?" I sat up straighter, my stomach twisting into a knot. I almost told him he was wrong, that I'd seen something, yeah, but it wasn't a man. It had moved far too fast and was way too low to the ground. It wasn't a human. Still, this kid obviously wasn't lying. He believed a person was chasing him, and for whatever reason, that got under my skin. I didn't see a person, kid. I only saw a dog." Though the word felt wrong the second I said it, and that was when he lost it. His whole body locked up like he'd been electrocuted. His hands shot up to his head, gripping his hair so tight I thought he was gonna rip it out. Then he just started shaking, rocking back and forth on his knees. No, you don't understand. That wasn't a dog." He was crying now, gulping for air between words. "It was him. It was the guy from the alley, and he wouldn't stop." Something about the way he said that, like he'd been running for a long time, like this wasn't the first time it happened to him. "Hey kid, look, come on," I said. "Just get in, I'll take you home." He hesitated, his whole body wired like he was ready to bolt, but then his shoulders slumped, like all the fight had just drained out of him. He pulled himself up, yanked open the door, and climbed inside. As soon as he shut the door, I locked him, and not because I thought there was somebody lurking, but for his safety. I don't want this kid off on the streets by himself. "All right, where to?" I asked him. He wiped at his face, still breathing hard. "Turn left up there, and then just keep going straight." I pulled back onto the road, my eyes flicking back to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Empty. Nothing behind us but the stretch of road swallowed up by the night. "All right, so tell me what happened," I asked him. The kid sighed and stared at his hands. He was maybe 13 or 14. His clothes were filthy, like he'd fallen more than once. His hands were still shaking, but he clenched them into fists and tried to stop it. "I was going to meet my friends. We were gonna see a movie." He shook his head. "I cut through the alley by Marlin's because it's faster," and he trailed off. "And what?" His voice seemed to get smaller. "He was there, just standing there." I kept driving, gripping the wheel tighter. "All right, well, what'd he look like?" He rubbed at his arms like he was trying to get warm. "Tall, black coat, real long, almost to the ground. Hair was real greasy and cropped short, like cut it himself." He then hesitated and added, "His eyes were really dark, so dark that I couldn't even see his pupils, just black, like holes." A cold weight then settled in my gut. "What'd he say? Did he say anything to you?" The kid just inhaled shakily, Weird stuff. Said he knew me, said he's seen me before. He looked out the passenger window like he didn't even want to say the rest. Go on, I urged him. The kid's jaw tightened. He said my mom wasn't home, that my dad didn't care about me. He said I could scream if I wanted, but nobody would come. I felt this subtle anger now rising up in my chest. Was he making any of that up? I don't know, but he knew stuff about me, stuff he shouldn't have. We both got quiet. Then he tried to grab me. He moved so fast, I don't even know how. I just barely got away, and I ran. He blinked fast, staring off at the dashboard. I could tell he was about to cry again. And no matter how fast I ran, he was always right behind me. Every step, every turn, never fell behind, not even once. My truck then rolled over this pothole, jarring us both. The kid then sniffed hard. And then the lights started going out. I shot him a look. What? The street lights. As I ran, they were going out above me, one by one, like something was sucking the light away. Goosebumps then crawled up my arm, and I forced my hands to stay steady on the wheel. The kid was quiet for a moment, then he continued. He caught me right before you came. I turned my head sharply. What do you mean he caught you? The kid took a breath, his fingers digging into the seat. He grabbed my hair, he yanked my head back so hard I thought my neck was gonna snap. His voice then dropped lower, and then he licked me. The words hung in the air, making my stomach lurch. Licked you? Nodded, from my chest to my chin. And then I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat had gone dry. This kid suddenly had now sat up straighter. Turn left up here. I did. And then I saw something. There was a man walking on the shoulder of the road. Long black coat swaying with each step. His greasy hair was clean to his skull. His head was tilted slightly downward, but even from here, I could see it. The kid went dead silent. My hands clenched the wheel so tightly that my knuckles even popped. As we passed, the man lifted his head. And even though I couldn't see his eyes from the driver's seat, I felt them, watching. I nodded my head toward the guy. Is that him? The kid didn't say anything. He didn't speak. My gut screamed at me hard to hit the gas, to put as much distance as I possibly could between us, but instead, I gritted my teeth and spun the wheel. I flipped a U-turn. I may not see him again, so I figured I better squash this now, man to man. Typical horror movie fashion, the road was now empty in front of me. Gone. The man, gone. I just heard the kid whimpering to himself, curling in, his whole body trembling. I faced forward and forced the air up to my lungs and just kept driving. Whatever I just seen, whoever I just saw, it wasn't normal. I didn't say another word and neither did the kid. We just drove. I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting, almost wanting to see something. A shadow shifting in the darkness, a glimpse of that dark coat, those nasty ass teeth, but there was nothing. Just the quiet hum of the truck rolling down the road, and the streetlights stretching long and empty behind us. Eventually, the kid spoke up again. You saw him. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. I nodded, my eyes were locked on the road ahead of me. Yeah, kid, I did. He exhaled shakily. So, you believe me now? Honestly, I thought about lying, about saying something to calm him down, but I couldn't. My throat was still raw, my hands were still gripping the wheel like I expected to be yanked from my fingers. Hell, I just left the bar and rolled on to this whole bizarre mess. I don't know what to think. So I just responded, "Yeah, I believe you." The kid gave the last directions. His voice was brittle, like every bit of adrenaline had been drained out of him. I followed his directions each turn, keeping an eye on the houses as we rolled through the neighborhood. "Right here," he mumbled finally, and I pulled up to a small single-story house with a sunken roof and a porch light that barely was flickering. "You good from here?" I asked him. I felt like he wanted to say something else, but he just nodded, fumbling with the door handle. He stepped out and gripped the frame with shaky legs. "Look, kid, tell your folks about what happened. They need to know." He just scoffed at me and shook his head. "It won't matter." Before I could ask what he meant by that, he slammed the door shut behind him, and I watched him jog to the front porch, his shoulders still hunched like he was expecting something to grab him from behind. He yanked open the screen door and slipped inside, the warped door slamming shut behind him. Just like that, he was gone. I sat there frozen for a few more minutes, staring at the house. Finally, I put my truck in drive and took off. I don't know why I checked that road one last time. Maybe I was thinking I'd imagined it all, that the dark would swallow him up completely and I could go back to believing that I lived in a world where things like that didn't exist and didn't happen. I kept an eye around town for the next few weeks, but I never saw the guy again. I lived in Branson for another 20 years after that night. If that guy was a local, I'd have known him. I'd have seen him. But he never reappeared. And I never saw that kid again either. And now that I think about it, it was this weird one-off that has stuck with me for almost half of my life.